Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. As you know, each week I do my best to scour the earth to find the best of the best, and this week is no exception. We actually landed in Australia, the western part of Australia, where it's actually tomorrow there. So I told the guest today, don't tell me how tonight ends because I don't want to be disappointed. So I'm hanging out with Rael Bricker. How are you, sir?
Yeah, fantastic. And you?
Good. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for hanging out with us. We got a ton of stuff to cover. So you are the president of the professional speakers in Australia, the Western region. So you enjoy speaking to the masses, I'm assuming then, correct?
Yeah, it's been an interesting time over COVID because we've spent a lot of time staring at cameras rather than staring at faces in the audience. But in Western Australia, we're pretty lucky. The last 2-3 months, we've had live events coming back. Okay. And we can actually feel warm bodies and feel some body heat in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that crazy? Speaking to an empty room is really a challenge. So, well, hey, I want to start with this question. In my research today about you on your website, I found this, and I really thought this was a great question that I wanted to start off with. And it said, when was the last time you feel that you were excellent? You know, I think the word excellence, or I think about how it's hard sometimes for us to actually think good things about ourselves without, always beating ourselves up. So I'm excited to unpack some of the things that you have today. And I hope if you're listening today, that you can find some things that you are excellent at, and then you can do something with them, make a business, do yourself a favor, improve your career. There's plenty of things that you can work on with that. So also on your website, Rael, you had mentioned things about the challenges ahead being significant. So I just want to kind of touch on these. One of them you talked about was the future of work and remote working. So what do you see as some of the challenges that are facing people, maybe an entrepreneur listening that's struggling with a workforce, maybe somebody listening that's a remote worker? What are some of the things that you're seeing that people are struggling with there?
Well, there's a whole lot. So thank you for the question, Dave. Can I put excellence into a context for a start?
Yeah.
I talk about excellence a lot. I'm branded as the business excellence guy. So everything I work with is around excellence. And why excellence? Because I don't believe we can ever achieve perfection. But excellent is just being the best we can be, showing up as the best version of ourselves every single day. And so when I coach people, when I mentor people, when I stand in front of an audience, I make sure that I'm the best version of myself every day. And hopefully that shines off onto them. So for the people listening, it is about, when you have to drag yourself out of bed in the morning, and you have to say, damn, I'm going to work now. Yes, that's okay. But as long as you're in that environment and the entrepreneur listening or whatever, you as long as you're showing up as the best version of yourself, that's perfect. Okay. That is perfection in your eyes on that day. So today's excellence may be different to tomorrow's or yesterday's, whereas everyone sees excellence as this mountain. It's not about the mountain. It's about the next step that makes you get closer to the top of the mountain.
Wow. And that's such a relief. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. It kind of takes the pressure off early because excellence means sometimes unattainable, right? And I think that it's really hard. And a lot of people then are like, why even try? I'm just going to show up, do my bare minimum, head home at the end of the day, do my 50 weeks a year type of thing. So thanks for sharing that piece about excellence.
So the challenge of remote work is even more complicated because I've interviewed 90 companies as well around the world, detailed interviews for my next book. And my book is on culture and what drives their culture in the organization. And one of the interviews I was struck with was a company in the US, in Midwest US, an insurance company, large insurance company. And they had a call center. And unlike most companies, their call center was actually on US ground. It wasn't in the Philippines or the
Sure.
Caribbean or somewhere else, So what struck me was the beginning of COVID. They said to their whole workforce, you need to now work from home. And so a lot of the workforce and the unions got involved in particularly in their call center. Now, if we put a call center into context, call center is generally your lower level socioeconomic worker.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Right. And so they said to them, you have to now work from home. And then the union got involved and the staff got involved and said, but we don't have good enough internet connections at home. We don't have fast enough computers at home.
Sure. Sure.
And all those things. And the company, yes, I understand, was a big cost. They had 500 people, within that call center environment.
Wow.
But they turned around to them, and this is large, upper management, so C-suite, different socioeconomic level, turned around to them and said, well, the same way you have to organize your transport to get to work, we are saying that the minimum requirement to get to work is that you have high-speed internet and a decent computer. So that already caused a lot of ructions within their team.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've asked a number of companies about it, and they've said, look, technically their approach was probably correct, but practically in the midst of a pandemic, they should have done it or handled it differently. So that was just one example. But the extension of that was what they didn't realize at the C-suite, that a lot of these same people were living in either multi-generational housing. So, grandparents, parents, and kids all in the same housing.
Sure.
In relatively small housing.
Mm-hmm.
So kids were at home from school because schools were shut. Kids were remote learning. Parents were working at the same dining room table. And how do you work in a call center answering calls when you've got kids trying to ask you questions for school at the same table? So huge challenges in that particular case. So that was right at the beginning of COVID, and that kind of sparked. So I've worked in the culture space for a number of years. Culture, strategy, culture, leadership, and strategy are my three mantras of what I look at in businesses.
Okay.
But the culture and the work from home and the future of work really has changed the last 18 months, as we've gone through COVID. So remote workforce. So there are a few problems now. The problem is that in a remote workforce or in a face-to-face workforce, you could call a town hall meeting. You could walk into your call center, your office, whatever it is, say to the staff at 4:00 tomorrow afternoon, there'll be snacks and sodas. Everybody come in. Let's have a conversation about work, whether it's 10 staff or 500 staff, doesn't matter. You can't obviously do that with a remote workforce.
Right.
And the problem is that a lot of C-suites didn't adjust to how they need to do that. So what was happening there? And I'll, instead of being able to have the big company-wide meeting, which they've always had, they never empowered teams. And so part of the new future of work is empowering everybody down the line in the organization to make sure they are looking after the well-being of their staff. So an example, I have 15 staff in one of my other businesses,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a financial services business that I own. I've owned for 20 years. When COVID hit, I was actually in isolation myself because I had just come back from a wedding in Bali. So I was working at home, trying to arrange new computers, monitors, hardware, etc. I didn't have to get good internet because most of my staff had good internet, but I got everything organized for my staff whilst being in isolation myself.
Sure.
But what struck me was the next thing I did was I said to them, every morning at 9:00, we're going to have a Zoom meeting.
Okay.
Everybody has to have their camera on. I don't care whether you don't have your makeup on, whether, you're still in your pajamas because you're working at home. I don't care.
Yeah.
And it's 10 minutes and it's not about work.
Okay.
It's about what we would say to each other around the coffee machine in the morning.
Interesting. Okay.
So it was trying to simulate. Now I only have 15 staff that were on that call every day. So you could fit everyone onto your screen. But I told everyone, I don't care what they look like. I want cameras on.
Yeah.
Because I want to see their eyes. I wanted to look at them and go, are you okay?
Yeah.
Because mental health is one of the biggest challenges of remote work. So that's what I did on a small level. The problem is larger corporations, didn't really create a culture and haven't created a culture where team leaders are doing the same thing with their teams. They feel it's imposing. And I'm saying it's not. The same way you'd walk up to someone's desk and say, hey, how was your night? How did your daughter's ballet go last night? Well, if you don't know that stuff about your staff, you're a bad leader in the first place. But
Yep.
But you walk up to the staff and go, hey, how was your daughter's ballet recital last night? Or, how did you go, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever your conversation is with them,
Sure.
doesn't matter. But that's what you're doing. Okay. So
that's awesome.
So that's one of the things is, I think, empowering teams and having a way to interact with the team on a daily basis at least, or a weekly basis, which is relaxed. And if you don't, I'll indulge you with a quick story for the end of financial year here in Australia.
Sure.
So we always have drinks. Now that sounds bad. It sounds like you're alcoholic. No, it's not. But a big thing here is EOFY, end of financial year, and everyone in the financial services industry breathes a sigh of relief on the 30th of June when the financial year finishes, and we generally have drinks for the staff. So we happen to have been in lockdown on the 30th of June this year. So at about 10 in the morning, I was sitting at home and I sent my staff a message saying, okay, bring your own drinks at 4:30 this afternoon. We're having end of financial year drinks by Zoom. Okay. Well, it's the best we could do.
Yeah.
And then about 2 hours later, I was sitting there and I thought, let's surprise the team. And again, it's only a team of 15, so it's quite small. So I called the local bottle shop who has retail outlets all over the state.
Okay.
And I arranged with them for a bottle of gin, because we have this concept of gin tasting in my office every couple of weeks. I arranged a bottle of gin and 4 bottles of tonic to be delivered to every staff member's house between 2 and 4 in the afternoon.
Nice.
It also told me that they were at home because I knew all the deliveries went through. That was a separate issue. And I didn't tell anyone that, except my right hand, that it was happening.
Sure.
And I sent his first, so that his arrived, and he messaged me and said, yep, it's arrived. They're all on the way.
Great.
And they all started getting these text messages from the delivery drivers going, your delivery's on the way. And they were going, well, I didn't order anything. They go, no, definitely for you. And all these deliveries arrived, and we had a 2.5 hour, everyone sitting at home. So it was good, responsible stuff, because they didn't want driving anywhere. So that's how you build teams.
Sure. That's awesome.
Corporates need to be able to empower their teams as they work down the organization, particularly in remote workforce. That day-to-day contact is going to become much more critical.
Gotcha. Well, and you bring up a word that I want to kind of unpack, because we use the word culture all the time. And I think it's so nebulous that it's hard to actually define. So if you had to define culture, Rael, how would you define that?
Well, it's a set of shared beliefs and values. And when you use the word belief, you sometimes tread on the religious thing, and that sort of gets all confused. Sure. So I actually say purpose and values. And that company shares. So in my research for the next book, which is on culture, the working title of the book at the moment is If Culture Ate Strategy for Breakfast, What's for Dinner? And so I looked at what were the drivers of culture in organizations in order to define it. So we define culture as this shared set of beliefs and values, or purpose and values. And that really was the driver of culture. That great organizations had either a purpose or a set of values that everybody in the organization shared. Now, what's the difference? Values are really how people relate to each other internally, whereas purpose is some greater purpose of the organization. The classic was when Kennedy visited NASA in I think it was 1962 was the story told.
Okay.
And there was this guy in the corner sweeping furiously. And Kennedy walked up to him and said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm helping get a man on the moon. And he looked at him, he said, what do you mean? And that was, by the way, man on the moon was not a sexist or, comment. It was the way the wording was in the 60s.
Sure.
And he said, because if I keep this place clean, I'm doing my bit to put a man on the moon.
Nice.
And so that was that shared purpose. That was the classic example of a purpose of an organization that creates a rich and robust culture.
So I want to, I love that comment. I want to ask you something about that, because I mean, from a practicality standpoint, Rael, if somebody's listening and they agree with what you said, but they don't have the key word there is shared, in my mind, the shared, somebody on the team doesn't share my values, doesn't share my, beliefs, doesn't share the team aspect of that. They're a good worker. They just maybe don't fit in right. What's your advice to somebody listening that might have that person on their team, or they might be that person on the team?
Okay, so a few things. The first is that, so one of the companies I interviewed, and I'll put into context, their value set, the first word they have in their value set is fun, F-U-N, fun.
Okay.
And okay, this country has sort of lesser stringent human resource requirements.
Okay.
It's a country in Africa. And so the human resources director said to me, we tell people, if you're not having fun, don't work here. Now, that has a whole lot of human resource protocols that are problematic, but conceptually, that's what it is. So their first, and there were only 2 of the companies I've interviewed that have explicitly the word fun as one of their values. So that company said, if you're not having fun, we don't want you here. And the second part of their value set was authenticity. Was you have to be authentic to the brand. You have to believe in the brand. And those 2 of their 5 values really defined what it meant to fit in. Okay, so that's and they had 60 staff over 5 countries. They were a wholesale distribution business for an African product. So interesting business, but quite, explicitly defined. And I know you're a fan of disc profiling, and a lot of people I meet with, say, disc, oh, that old thing, and they sigh.
Yeah.
And I go, yeah, that old thing, but it's proven to me over and over and over again how accurately it reflects people's behaviors. Now, a lot of people see it as a personality profile. It's actually a behavioral profile. Okay.
Sure.
And as you know, so that's the first. So one of the things I look at then is if somebody doesn't fit in, well, is it because they just don't buy into the purpose, or maybe the organization doesn't have this greater purpose? So I'm not talking about a mission and a vision statement, right? So I quote, every company's mission statement says on the wall, we are going to be the best, open brackets, fill in a word there, close brackets, using the best, whatever it is, in the industry, whatever, right? So that's not what I'm talking about. So some great examples, a software company that I've done a lot of work with has their purpose as practical genius delivered. 3 words, practical genius delivered. Now, how does the organization buy into that? Everybody sees themselves as part of this practical genius that's delivering great solutions on time and on budget.
Sure.
Doesn't say anything about them being a software business, all right?
Yep.
But what it is that everyone fits into that. Now, if you don't have a purpose, let's look deeper at the individuals. Let's use the disc profiling. Let's understand. So as a manager, I work with a lot of companies where we use disc, and we call it red. We call it red, yellow, green, and blue, and not DISC, just because memory. But we use that as a base to say, okay, that person is a high whatever, high blue, right? A C, compliance. Well, you can by and large not expect that high C, okay, to be sitting around telling jokes at the lunch table. Okay. That would be just out of character for their behavior.
Sure.
But there are ways you can engage with a high C to bring them into things. So a high C is about data, it's about testimonials, it's about spreadsheets, it's about, and so engage with them on their level. I mean, one of the classic communication things that came out of William Marsden, who started DISC, was that you need to be able to communicate to people in the way they want to be communicated with,
Right.
rather than the way you want to communicate with them. And I think you say there's an employee who doesn't fit in or whatever. A lot of it is because I think that managers are not that, I was interviewing someone the other day and I asked for a reference from someone and they told me they have a high IQ but a low EQ. And I thought that was a great statement.
Sure. Yep. Yep.
And so that emotional intelligence, you can actually train, you can actually empower the manager of a team.
Sure.
By giving them profiles of their team members, by analyzing those profiles and by teaching people how to communicate with the various behavioral styles. Now that the same thing is when you don't fit in. As you said, what happens if you're the person who doesn't fit in? Well, if you don't fit in, then you have to go into your own why. That's a different conversation.
Sure.
It's about, Simon Sinek famously made the statement, start with why, famous. But the truth of it is, if we don't have our own why aligned with the corporate why, then it's probably time to be looking around for something else, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so true. I think that the self-awareness that people have, it's okay to be aware that maybe this isn't the right place, because like you said, you're either going to acclimate to the way of the company or you are going to have problems down the road. So, unless you're the owner, then you end up having to kind of acclimate your way to somebody else's way. So you had mentioned also one of the challenges, and I never really heard this word. I think I understand what you mean, but I'd like your feedback on underemployment. When you talk about underemployment, what are you referring to with that word, Rael?
So there's a few things that happen there, actually. So underemployment is when so two things, we look at our unemployment statistics. That is people who are not in a job and are actively seeking a job. That's the Australian definition. I'm not 100% sure what the US definition would be of that, but the Australian definition of when they publish a statistic that said we have 5% or 7% unemployed, that is used as a measure of people who are out of work but are actively seeking work.
Okay.
So it's not just of the population, because there are those who've just gone, I'm claiming my income protection insurance or my social security and I'm not going to bother.
Sure.
So that's the Australian definition of unemployment.
Okay.
Underemployment is actually a bigger problem because people built lifestyles around, say, working a 60-hour week, 40-hour week, and 20 hours of overtime, particularly in the trades, labor hire, construction, etc., where the standard week would be a 60-hour week, not a 40-hour week. Now, the problem with the human psyche is that we build our lifestyle, our expenses, there's an old saying that says, who dies with the most toys wins. Well, I'm not quite sure about that, but people buy their toys and their lifestyle things based on their income.
Right.
One of the challenges is during crisis like COVID, etc., people were still employed, but went from a 60-hour week to a 30-hour week or a 10-hour week because the companies wanted to keep them on the payroll. So they don't come up in any of our statistics of, wow, this pandemic is a problem. Look at the unemployment. And I know there was, massive unemployment in the US. The figures were astounding. Sure. And Australia didn't really feel the pinch of that except in certain sectors like hospitality.
Sure.
But underemployment is where people are still employed, so they don't get social security, they don't get social services, but yet they are underemployed for what their lifestyle was built on. Okay. And so that's a problem because on a national basis, we don't see that. So that's the one part of underemployment. And the second is obviously when people are not recognized for their talents in an organization and they're just underemployed. They're employed in a job and maybe the boss doesn't like them or doesn't know how to communicate with them or doesn't know how to understand them. And therefore they get looked over for promotion after promotion and they're underemployed. They actually have value to add to the business and are just not being used to add value.
And thanks for clarifying that, because when I heard that word I thought of that person that is underemployed in the sense of they're not utilizing their talents. They're not maybe in a job that they're, is fulfilling to them. And, if that's you and you're listening, I just want to encourage you, to, get excellent at what you do and think about maybe jumping outside that comfort zone a little bit and looking to see what other things are there, because I think underemployment, and I'd love to get your feedback on this, Rael. To me, underemployment it can be a damaging thing to a human being. Is that accurate?
Well, we all, no one is an island. There's a show called Life Below Zero, based around people living right up northern Alaska.
Okay.
And there's one person in the show who literally lives a solitary lifestyle on the highest northernmost point of Alaska, and literally refuels planes that come past. And that's about her entire existence. That and hunting for food. Okay.
Sure.
Majority of the rest of the 7 billion people in the world can't do that.
Yeah, correct.
We need some form of affirmation. Now, there are those who are very, very spiritual and get their affirmation through being spiritual, but the majority of people truly need a pat on the back.
Sure.
Here is the challenge for a corporate manager, and I deal with this on a daily basis with my clients. Millennials, I know we don't like grouping people, but millennials are a whole group on their own, and I think Gen Z are worse. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We live in Google time and Siri time. So where the baby boomer or the Gen X was happy to have a performance review every 6 months,
sure,
the millennial wants a pat on the back every day to say,
right,
you did a good job today.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So how do you as a manager manage that shrinking of the timeline where your team members want these positive affirmations all the time, and the timeline has shrunk from a 6-monthly review to a daily review? Now, I spoke at a conference in 2019 when we still had face-to-face, and we traveled in Nepal, of all places, in Kathmandu in Nepal, which was pretty cool because got to see sunrise over Everest the next day.
Sure.
But the conference was the Agile Scrum for Southeast Asia. There were, 500-600 delegates at that conference in Kathmandu. And what happened is I was the opening speaker talking about corporate culture, right? And so I had nothing to do with the Agile methodology per se. But of the 2 days of the conference, I got really to understand this Agile methodology. And Agile, although it's only used in project management and software, the truth of it is it's actually something that meets our millennials and our Gen Z requirements, because the Agile Scrum is every morning you meet for 10 minutes and you define your workflow for that day. The next morning you meet again and say, this is what I achieved. And the Scrum Master says, great, well done. What's your task for today? Gotcha. And so it's somewhere between that and the 6-monthly corporate review.
Sure.
Is going to be the norm for every manager and for every organization. Gotcha. And so, yes, so we do need that affirmation that we're doing a good job. The problem is that managers are baby boomers, who still think, oh, well, I'll tell them in 6 months' time. Yeah. That's the challenge.
Wow. And to you, the funny thing is so a scrum to you is a huddle to us, right?
Yes, a huddle. Yeah, they call it an agile scrum.
I see this, I say this football scrum. I'm like, oh my gosh, if we do that every morning, that'd be fun. But I think that's
exactly
really
where it came from, is that idea of the scrum together. And in agile methodology, they call it a scrum.
Okay.
As you say, it's a morning huddle. Yeah.
Sure. Well, and I think that just reiterates why DISC and those types of, behavior assessments are so important, because you might have somebody on your team that is motivated by positive words like that, and you might have somebody else motivated by something else. And we as leaders tend to make the assumption that everybody's built just like me. So if I like something, if I'm motivated by one thing, obviously everyone else on my team is motivated by the same thing in my mind. And that's so inaccurate. And I think that's what's so awesome about using assessments like that is I get to break down my team. So like use your 15 people, Rael, on your team on that, in your situation, you know, everybody's different. And if you treated everybody the same, you would have some pretty major disconnects. So that's what I love about the DISC, you know, model to, or red, green, yellow, and blue, you know, whichever you use, to be able to really better understand your team. So that I appreciate you sharing that.
One of the extensions of DISC that we use is called motivators,
Right.
where you actually look at people's motivating factors.
Right.
And so it's a slightly different assessment, but the report is a similar report to a DISC. And, you know, as I mentioned to you, my cube earlier, well, my cube that I have, which covers all 4 behavioral styles, actually has on the side of it, this particular style, this is how you communicate with them, and this is what they are motivated by, and this is how they are working under stress. So when you look at somebody who you know they're a blue, let's say a C in DISC, you see their behaviors have changed. You can see, oh, wait a minute, they're under stress.
Sure. Yep.
And that's just a little handy guide that I give to my clients.
And I feel like, you know, I feel like leaders are so darn busy now that they're listening right now and they're going, oh my gosh, how in the world am I going to be able to, you know all the people on my team, know how to communicate with them, understand what motivates them, understand their behaviors. I mean, that's just way too much stuff. You know, I can hear the breaks going on as we speak. And yet this is why teams struggle. And I think, you know, in the US, we have, you know, about a 30% engagement rate of employees. You know, Gallup shows 2 out of 3 people show up every day not engaged in their work. And it's so easy as leaders to blame them. And quite frankly, I've been, you know, over the years of my work and talking with leaders, I'm trying to explain to them, you guys have a pretty big relationship and responsibility in that. I mean, and so it's almost like you can't afford not to know your team that well. So I'm just curious what your take is on that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It is about the role of the manager is not a directing role anymore. Okay. I always use, you know, I often use the analogy, it's like herding cats sometimes, you know, because herding cats, they go in opposite directions. Okay. And that's okay. But the true good leader can, so one of the things, you know, and again, I keep saying one of the things I do, but it's hard. One of the things we do when we're educating people on the behavioral styles is we teach them how to identify the people's styles very quickly without even doing a full assessment. You know, we'd obviously prefer they did a full assessment and got a detailed report, but you can identify people from a simple thing like a handshake, which under COVID was complicated because no one was shaking hands. But you know, there's facial expressions, the words they use, etc. And so as a manager, as a leader, you know, you do have to be cognizant of those. In fact, so I have all these fun glasses behind me. Okay, this is a real background because it's video, everyone can see it. But I have all these fun glasses. So these are my yellow glasses. And really it's about when you're dealing with somebody who is behaviorally yellow, so that's an eye on the disc, you have to look at them through yellow glasses. You can't look at them through another color of glasses. Because if you look at them through another color of glasses, you're not going to communicate with them. So, you know, an example, if you're giving a talk to 10 staff, right? One of the techniques that we work with is traditional speech. Traditional boss stands up, suit and tie, I don't wear ties, okay? And says, right, team, you know, I'm going to brief you on the strategy and we're going to talk for the next 30 minutes. Great. Traditional speech, great opening, get their attention, blah, 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 close it. Traditional speech, okay? Let's look at a different structure. Let's start off by saying your D, your red in my world, your D in DISC, your dominance, they have a short attention span. They want the high level facts and they want to know what's in it for me and how quickly can we do it.
Right.
in a broad sense.
Right.
So you start off talking and you talk just to them. You give them the high level facts, you give them the what's in it for me and how quickly we're going to do it. And then what you get in half your audience, in fact, not half, 10% of your audience generally is red, is D.
Okay.
They'll start nodding. And the others will go, what's this person nodding for? Because what have they got that I haven't got already? Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
But you've spoken to them, you've brought them on side in your audience. Yep. So then you move to the I message, which is about the team, about having fun, and it's about laughing and having fun and bringing inclusivity and everything else into the team.
Right.
Now you've got your yellows, your eyes, and your reds nodding. Okay. Like those little things you put on the back of the car that bob their heads. Okay. You've got your yellows and your reds nodding, and your green and your blue, your S and your C are going, what are these people on about? We haven't got to that point yet.
Sure.
But you've brought them on side. Now you flick back to your red. You give them another little tidbit of what's in it for them. Then you go to your green. You talk to your S, right? You talk about deep relationships and long-term relationships and things like that. Then you bring back something that keeps your reds and yellows on team. So we've done the same timeline of 30-minute talk about the strategy of the company, but we haven't just done an opening, a conclusion, and a bit of blah in the middle. You've actually dedicated it to those 4 different behaviors. And then you get to the data at the end and you turn around and say, some of you are not interested in the data, and that's okay too. But there are some of the people, in fact, 37% of world population are actually C on the DISC model, right? And so that's the biggest single group. S and C make up 70%. So you basically turn around to your D and your I, and you say, okay, guys, I'm going to delve into the rabbit hole of detail for the next 5 minutes. Please don't fall asleep. That's the way I would speak. Sure. Please don't fall asleep. Please don't take out your mobile phones and start texting. Just let me be, because there are people in this audience who want the data. And then you come back and engage them again. Completely different structure, but it engages everyone in the team.
Wow, that's great. And it's interesting in the way I look at it, Rael, is that I think of when I'm actually doing the DISC training in a group, and we do the group wheel where where everybody is in the team, and we share that with the group. It kind of helps people understand, to be like, oh, that's why so-and-so is like that, And I think that the more that you can get that wall to drop, for all different personality styles, the more success that you're going to have. And if you have to tell people, this guy is going to need it this way, this person's going to need it that way, she's going to need it this way. I mean, it's kind of clunky at first, but if you are doing these regular meetings, people really start to acclimate to that way. Because I have like a 6-part DISC training and by, the first couple, it's really clunky, but by 3 and 4 and 5, they really start to understand, why things are going that way. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
When we use a simple technique in our training, I pick up a pen, not normally one like this. I actually have one that has 4 colors on, but I have one on my desk right now. And I'll say, right, John over here and Mary over here, you're going to role play in front of the group. Everyone hates role plays, but you got to kind of break the ice at some point.
Right. Yep.
But you turn around to them and say, all right, John, and I'll flick Mary a card on the side so John doesn't see it, and say, you're a blue. Right now, John, you have to sell this pen to Mary.
Sure.
But you don't know her behavior. So you have to ask probing questions now,
right,
to find out what her behavioral style is. And then you'll know how to talk to her. And suddenly you see those light bulbs come on. To me, that's my joy. That's
Sure.
my affirmation.
Sure.
When I see these light bulbs come on and people are connecting like that.
That's awesome. And I think that's, as we start to come in for a landing today, I think that's really so critical of what the culture is, because everybody has their own thought of what it is. And I think if we can kind of rally around and create almost like I want to say like a stake in the ground. This is what our culture is. And then you as a team member have to find your way through that. I really think that culture would improve whether it was in person or it was remote. I think that, even remote brings its own challenges, but we all know there's certain people on the team that love to talk. And then there's certain people that, like you said before, just love spreadsheets. So, if you don't understand whatever each individual person, what value they add to the team and the best way to communicate with them, I think of it as like different languages. I mean, if we were talking in different languages right now and I didn't understand you and you didn't understand me, there would be zero communication. And so that's what I think is missing in culture. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to flick cameras for a second because it's hard. We get on the audio track. I'm going to have to explain it, but for the video people watching, it's fairly easy.
Sure.
But I often work on three concentric circles.
Sure.
And I say there's this relationship between culture, leadership, and strategy. And that if you get all three of those right, then you get this thing in the middle called return on culture.
Wow.
And we always look at return on investment in an organization. We don't really focus on the return on culture. And so the problem with return on investment is it lags. So return on investment is measured financially, which means that the activity 12 months ago is yielding some result now.
Sure.
Whereas if we work on our culture and our leadership and our strategy, we end up putting something into place that's going to yield us results in the future. And that's this return on culture. And we have a series of tools that we use where we can actually measure culture and leadership and actually put a number on it and then measure it again in 6 months' time to see its improvement or its degradation, whichever one you're looking at.
Well, and that really speaks to anybody that's a high D, the results driven person, because everybody wants an ROI. Usually a high D is all about what's in it for me, what am I going to get out of it? And usually when you talk about culture, because it's so ambiguous, people tend to not really have a good handle on how to put an ROI on your culture. And they just make the assumption if Susie's happy, then everything's going to be good in the company. And that's just, unfortunately, that's not always the way it works. So I appreciate that there's a return on investment from a culture perspective. So that's awesome.
I mean, and it's interesting when we start working with companies and we analyze. So what happens if you have a great culture? I use a sailing analogy. Now I know you're in Chicago and there's a small body of water near Chicago. Actually a fairly large body of water. And and I use a sailing analogy. So if you have culture and leadership, so you've got this great culture, you have great leaders, but you don't have a strategy. You're a little bit like that sailing ship out on the water without a compass because you're directionless. You don't know which way to take the company because there's no strategic direction.
Sure.
If you have leadership and strategy and a horrible culture, so you actually have good leaders and a great strategy, but you don't have a rich and robust culture, you're a little bit like that boat that's out on the water that suddenly the wind drops and they're becalmed. They're just sitting there on the water going, oh, how do we get anywhere from here? And if you have a great culture and a great strategy and a lack of leadership, you're like a ship without a rudder. You're rudderless,
right?
Because there's no one actually steering the ship. But if you can combine all those three ideas together, you get to this return on culture.
And that's those three pieces together are just really a great way to improve your company. And so as we land this today, I just want to know what would Rael Bricker's tip of the week be for somebody listening?
So for the entrepreneurs, I'm going to go back to what was the working title of my book, which was Give Up Control to Gain Control. It's one of the chapters in my book, and I'll offer your listeners a free PDF download, and I'll give you the link to that.
Oh, great.
In the show notes later on. But it's give up control to gain control. In order to be truly successful as an entrepreneur, as a leader, what you need to be able to do is identify your own strengths and identify the things that you're not good at, or you're good at, but don't generate any benefit to the organization. So I'm terrible at admin. As we discussed disc profiles earlier, my blue and my green, my S and my C are in the floor somewhere.
Yeah.
But if I have to do them, I can behave like that for a short period of time and do that. But I don't like doing them. And
Sure.
it's not worth my while to do the $10 an hour tasks when I can do the $500 an hour revenue. And so that's what
Right.
giving up control to gain
Gotcha.
control is. But
Gotcha.
giving up control of the day-to-day things and empowering you, getting your time back to do the things that are going to grow the business.
Wow. That's really hard for most entrepreneurs to give up control, right? Because that's why we are doing what we're doing. That's why we own our own company. That's why we are in charge of our own destiny, so to speak, is we want to be in complete control. So to you, for anyone listening, let it sink in before you just put the brakes on or, change channels, because there is a lot of wisdom there in what Rael said. Is you got to give up some control in order to get control, and apply it however you want in your life. But I really encourage you to sit with that, because I know the more that I sit with what he just said, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so helpful to give up control. Like, why would you pay somebody $10 an hour and they not, and or $20 an hour, and you are charging $500 an hour? Why would they not be doing as much as they possibly could? Why do you need to control what the address labels look like? Or I mean, why do you have to control that? And I've seen that over the years. So thanks so much for sharing that.
My business in financial services doubled in size in 12 months after I brought on team members to take away my admin tasks. And this is admin for mortgages. So I would see the clients, work out the strategy, and up until that point, I would then go off and help them fill out their application forms, send those applications to the bank, sit on the phone waiting for the bank to answer, as we all do when we phone the banks,
Sure.
right? And so I was wasting half my day on those tasks.
Yep.
And suddenly I employed somebody, and I empowered them. I'm pretty much an easygoing sort of guy. I literally said, here's the job, come and ask me if there's a problem, and come and ask me and I'll train you some more, and go off and do it. And they made a few mistakes along the way, but they really learned and became fantastic at it. But suddenly I could see 3 clients in a day, not one.
Sure.
How does that change the nature of the business? It grew it exponentially.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we keep going, oh, we can't afford it, we can't afford it. Yes, it is a cost.
Yep.
But you have to weigh off what can you generate to offset it against that cost. And it's remarkable when you make that leap.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that. This time flew by, Rael. So I just want to thank you for investing time. Like I said, it's already tomorrow morning there. So you got up early for us today. Thank you so much. If people that were listening to this, were something inspired them, something clicked, something was like, I got to learn more about that. What's the best way for people to reach out to you, Rael, if they want to learn more about you and your businesses?
Connect with me at raelbricker.com, rael at RAEL at raelbricker.com. I'm always happy. I respond to my own emails. I don't have a VA responding to my emails. So I actually do that at crazy hours of the day and the night. I actually will make sure I respond to anyone who reaches out to me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. There's probably 4 to 5 posts a week on LinkedIn. And again, connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. But, I'm always happy to take questions by email. And as I said, if they go to raelbricker.com, it's not on the menu. They've got to go to raelbricker.com/free book, and they can actually download a free copy of my PDF of my book called Dive In, that was published in 2018. It's called Dive In: Lessons Learned Since Business School. It's a collection of my ideas in 30 years as an entrepreneur.
And I was going to ask you what inspired you. I have all these questions we didn't get to. So hopefully you'll honor us, and we'll get you back, and we'll get more of this information. But again, if you're listening and something kind of sparked you, this is where I try to encourage you every week to don't just sit there, do something. And, Rael is RAEL, and it's Bricker, BRICKER.com. All you have to do is go there and see what he's talking about. Something, if something inspired you, I would encourage you to do it now. Don't wait till later, because there's going to be way too many things that get in the way between now and then. So thank you, Rael, so much for hanging out with us. And thanks for the free book offer. So that's raelbricker.com/free book. And you can get that there. And I want to learn more about that excellence cube. So I'm going to order one. Can I buy that on your website?
No, they actually, but if you or anyone else sends me an address, a physical address, I will pop one in the mail to you.
Awesome. I'm going to do it. And you all the way from, these are coming all the way from Australia, aren't they?
Yep, they are. I have friends in the US and Canada. I may send them a batch and ask them to send them out. But yes, it's we're not sure how mail is actually traveling, because Australia as an island is closed to the world at the moment in
Okay.
COVID. Our borders are effectively shut. So
Okay.
but yes, no, mail is getting out. So yes, send me an email with your physical address. I'll get one sent out to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all this. And again, I always enjoy talking about culture, and you had some great feedback and great wisdom on that. So until we speak again, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Rael, thank you so much for all you're doing around the world to help the teams, and look forward to catching up with you again real soon.
It's been fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.